Hello and welcome to News 9 Facebook Live once again with me, Adarsh Vepachedu. Now, the known and sure-shot way of containing the spread of coronavirus is a nationwide lockdown. While countries across the world have enforced lockdown till as long as they possibly can, it cannot continue as it puts plenty of strain on the economy of countries. But what if the spread of virus is so extreme that a second lockdown is the only way out? Well, this seems to be the reality of India's longtime ally, Israel. The country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has in the latest announced a 3-week lockdown in the country. This makes Israel the first developed economy to take such a drastic measure to curb a possible second wave of the novel coronavirus. Beginning this Friday, the start of the Jewish high holiday season, schools, restaurants and hotels will remain shut among several other businesses, and Israelis will face restrictions on movement as well. Now, you must be thinking, if India too is seeing record numbers of cases every day, which is really the case, why not another lockdown in India? Well, what's happening in Israel simply cannot be compared to what is happening right here in our country. Just to give you some context as to why Israel has decided to impose a second lockdown, the country's population is about 9 million. And out of this 9 million population, 150,000 people have tested positive, which roughly is 1 in 60 people testing positive for the novel coronavirus. Now, if you were to compare that to India, we have a population of roughly 1.4 billion and we have a total of 4.85 million cases at this point in time, which is roughly 1 in every 288 people testing positive for the coronavirus here in India. So 1 in every 60 people in Israel are testing positive, as opposed to 1 in every 288 people here in India. Now, this simply goes on to show the gravity of the situation in Israel, somehow paving way for a second lockdown in the country. Now, given its population of 9 million, the country at this point in time has one of the world's worst outbreaks that the history of humanity has ever seen. It is now seeing more than 4,000 daily cases of the virus, and the country, Israel, initially earned praise for the way in which it handled the coronavirus outbreak, moving quickly to seal the country's borders and appearing to somehow bring those raging infections under control. And it has since been criticized for opening businesses and schools a little too quickly and allowing the virus to spread unchecked. Now, much of all of this criticism has been aimed at the Prime Minister of Israel himself, Benjamin Netanyahu, who has faced a lot of public outcry, a lot of criticism over the way in which he has supposedly handled the coronavirus pandemic in his country. And he's in fact seen thousands of protesters descend on his Jerusalem residence almost every week. While Israel was lauded and while Benjamin Netanyahu himself was appreciated for his decisive response following the spring outbreak, Netanyahu appeared somehow distracted by either politics or personal matters, especially his trial for corruption allegations, as infection simply continued to peak over the summer. So what really is happening in Israel is there's a lot of political tension. The Prime Minister is facing a lot of criticism owing to the kind of corruption charges that he's been facing, and he's also taking a lot of criticism for not being able to handle the coronavirus pandemic in an efficient manner. So all of this put together, and yes, given the kind of small population that Israel has, and in that small population also you have so many cases coming in, that really is the reason. It's always an amalgamation, a mixture of multiple things coming together as to why a country really decides to go ahead for another lockdown. Now, you must understand that a lockdown is never easy. It takes its own toll on the country's economy, and even in the case of Israel, even during the first lockdown, there was so much damage that was done to its economy. But can you imagine if the same country is willing to go or has no other choice to go for another lockdown. You can only imagine as to what the condition has come down to in Israel. So that's what is different in Israel. Somewhere down the line, while the numbers may be minuscule, but the rate at which the infection is growing, and if you were to compare the overall number of infections with the population of the country, things are looking pretty bad for Israel, and that's the reason, and that's what has paved the way for the reimposition of a lockdown. So now you know as to how bad things really need to be for a country to go ahead and reimpose a lockdown. The bottom line really is Israel stands as a lesson for the rest of the world. It's indeed a wake-up call as to what can go wrong if in case things are not dealt with, if the virus is not dealt with in the right way. If we do not have things under control, then we may as well have to see another lockdown, because that's the only way that we can bring the coronavirus pandemic or the outbreak, the rapid spread of this virus, under control. One can only hope that countries like India take a lesson out of what Israel is experiencing at this point in time and ensure that we do not come down to that level and that we do not have to reimpose another lockdown right here in the country, because that is something that we simply cannot afford at this point in time. Well, if you've liked the information and the facts and figures that I've shared with you this evening, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to News 9 on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Many thanks for joining us.